Hey everybody, welcome back again to Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy, where the proof is in the singing. I'm doing a really fun series, and the series is taking isolated vocal tracks, solo vocals. I'm doing an analysis, a tutorial, and I'm talking about the recording process as well. So next up is Teen Spirit. The band is Nirvana. Of course, the singer is Kurt Cobain. And I want to touch on a couple things before we get there, because I think you might find this is a point of interest. We've done a few grunge bands from this area. This is the king of grunge, so to speak. I would say this maybe in Pearl Jam. I don't think Eddie Vedder likes to be called grunge, but they came out of that era at that time. And the whole goal was kind of flipping the proverbial FU to 80s metal and the overproduction of metal and the slickness of 80s metal, and maybe even to some degree classic rock as well. And so a lot of these bands kind of reach back to the 60s and try to grab that garage band era stuff and reduplicate that here in the Seattle movement. But what is also interesting is they did want it to be slick. They just didn't want you to know it, okay? And let me explain. So in this track, you would think it's very unassuming, and it sounds like it's just Kurt kind of, just kind of like rambling, and then it builds more and more intensity as it gets to the chorus. But if you listen to the the solo vocal track, you're gonna find that he multi-tracked the lead vocal. So it wasn't as spontaneous as I think he'd like you to believe, the cigarette and kind of at the end of the headstock of the guitar, I don't really care, man, I'm just gonna sing for you people kind of stuff. It was very orchestrated and very thought out. So I mentioned that by way of, so it was taking low fidelity stuff and making it slick, but not letting you know that they're doing it. So I wouldn't think it's criminal then for me to take that same concept and even ratchet that up a notch. So with that said, we're gonna get started. Here we go.
Load up on guns, bring your friends, fun to lose and to pretend.
Do you hear the multi-track? Load up, because if it was just single, it would sound like this. Load up on guns and bring your friends, right? It's very, very intimate and very not multi-tracked, right? Check it out, listen again, listen closely.
Load up on guns, bring your friends, fun to lose and to pretend.
Now, the other thing too is he does this on this verse and on the next verse, and we'll talk about it too. Like, you think things like, hey, bring your friends, like you think that that's just some sort of spontaneous thing that he's just, his heart's all out there wearing it on his sleeve, and that's what came out. But he happens to reduplicate the exact same yodel in the next verse too. So you know that this stuff was planned. You know what I mean? It wasn't just like it just came out. So I want to really drive that point home, because a lot of people think, well, yeah, they had their out-of-tune guitars, and they just, it was all about, I hate my father, and, just bashing out with, whatever came out. It was pretty orchestrated. It was just really under the radar. Let's continue.
She's overborn and self-assured. I know a dirty word.
So I know, right? Now, if you want to get into this vocal sound, I promise some vocal tutorials. Load up on guns. So first, you're going to hold back your breath, right? You're going to use some support. You're going to hold back your breath. And you're going to use a glut of air passing across the chords. Now, by the way, I did a version of this song. I'll put it in the description. You can see how I did. I actually did a cover of this, so you can see if I stacked up to this. But load. Just do this with me. Go low, and use a lot of air, right? Now, you're going to notice kind of a tickle in the throat. You're going to feel kind of dried out, even like I do right now. It's a very unhealthy way to sing, but it's a style, and it gives this kind of sound. And it also kind of creates almost like a harmonic of like a couple different voices, like a harmonic structure around the voice that gives this sort of hooty, fluty, David Lee Roth, the scream that he does, or it sounds like three voices. Kind of a similar effect here down low. So, load up on guns and bring your friends. Hey, I'm gonna use a lot of air when I sing, right? And that's sort of the motif of it. There's nothing more than just that. So, and then we get into the hellos, and you're gonna listen to how low. You're gonna hear how more and more intense, and even it gets brighter as it goes too. Like they kind of EQ'd it to stick out in the track a little bit more, so that it would be more pronounced. Check it out.
Hello, 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 hello,
Now, did you notice? It goes, hello, 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 and it gets more and more aggressive as it goes. So trust me, that was also pre-planned. In his mind, he thought, okay, I want it to be more intense. So by the time it gets to the chorus, it gets pretty intense, right? Now, the other thing too is you can hear that's even more multi-tracked, and you can hear they're even using some harmonizer on it as well. And there's he's starting to get into the Kurt Cobain grit. So it's hello, will the lights out? You know, yeah. And he's got this kind of really pinched and squeezed sound in his voice. Now, you can hear some abuse to the vocal folds. You can hear some drug abuse. You can hear just kind of being spent, but having enough energy to kind of push it across the finish line. So if you really listen to his voice sounds pretty spent. So let's listen to it first. Check it out.
With the lights out, it's just dangerous. Here we are now, entertainers, after stupid and contagious.
Now, I want you to notice again how multi-track that. With the lights out, entertainers, here we are now. Right? You can tell, you can hear my single vocal right now doesn't sound anything like the multi-track vocal that he's got going on. And he's using a really low-fi mic. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if you use like an SM57 or something. It sounds really low-fi. So, but anyway, let's check it out again so we can, go through this. Let's bear with me, check it out.
With the lights out, it's just dangerous.
Hear all that multi-track?
Here we are now.
Yeah. Here we are now. You hear the multiple layers of vocals?
Dangerous. Here we are now. Entertainers. After stupid and contagious. Here we are now. Entertainers. I'm Lotto. I'm Albino.
Okay, now I'm going to play the rest of this in a minute. I want to sit there and listen to the whole thing. Now, Dave Grohl said something really interesting. He was talking about how people were trying to make a lot of Kurt's lyrics really prolific. And Dave said, I was there, and I watched him scratching out just rhymes on a doily, on a little napkin from a restaurant. He goes, a mulatto, gelato, my vibrato. I mean, it was just kind of like anything that kind of rhymed, you kind of put it in there. And the irony of it is that Smells Like Teen Spirit, because maybe, let's say that Nirvana, and I would agree with this, really destroyed 80s metal and just crushed it and brought in a new era of grunge. And I would say that he was the king of that. And I'd say Eddie Vedder was probably the king of maybe stigmatizing or making the mark of how to sound like a modern rock male singer. The covered world art stuff that we've talked a lot about. But the irony of it, so when you think of the lyric of the song and the title of the song, Smells Like Teen Spirit, ooh, like there's an uprising and grunge is gonna take over and this, that. And I think it was Dave himself that said, no, man, it was a cologne that his girlfriend had called Teen Spirit or Smells Like Teen Spirit. So the cologne itself was advertising that it smelled like Teen Spirit, and then it became this really prolific statement. Now, it kind of rolled into that later, so I don't know if that was by osmosis or some grand design, but I don't think it's fair to give him that kind of credit for the lyric when it comes down to still like a mulatto, gelato, I mean, you know what I mean? There's so much to it that's just kind of schmeh. And I'm not dissing that, but let's continue with the chorus. Check it out.
I'm a mosquito, my libido.
A mosquito, my libido.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hey,
All right, let's move forward here. We're going to go to the next verse.
I'm worse than what I do best.
So if you notice, once he left the chorus, he never went back to load up on guns and bring your friends. He's not in that mode anymore. Check it out. He's more aggressive coming off the chorus, and he decided not to go back to more of an intimate, warmer, airier sound. Check it out.
I'm worse than what I do best, and for this gift I feel blessed. A little group has always been, always with.
no, right? There's that same chirp we talked about. So again, very deliberate. I know it's kind of a signature of his too. So I'm not saying, that we can't all have signatures and stuff. And again, by the way, when I'm talking negative stuff, I'm going to repeat myself over and over on this, guys. I'm not dissing Kurt Cobain. I'm just pointing out that he's human. He's human. And he got in the right place, the right time. He had the right thing to say. People really resonated with him. So he had a lot to say to his generation. Unfortunately, most of them killed themselves out of depression, which was a drag, a lot of drugs and whatnot. So, but anyway, but for whatever reason, he really resonated with a lot of youth at that time, and a lot of people even still to this day, which really like him a lot. And then the band itself was just, it did have a renegade free spirit about it, where it says, okay, I'm not even going to try to be Yngwie Malmsteen. I'm not going to try to be Paul Gilbert. I'm not going to try to be Bon Jovi or Whitesnake or any of those bands from the 80s. I'm just going to go, I'm angry at life. I'm frustrated. I'm depressed. This is how I feel. And so that really engaged a lot of people that were resonating again with the same sort of sentiment. Okay, I want to talk about the recording process of this too now. So as we said, these guys went out of their way to really do lo-fi stuff, and they wanted to be slick but not too slick to where you knew it, okay? And they were trying to set, they're pioneers and they're trying to set a precedent. So here's the lead vocal. I took a liberty to go ahead and add a doubler effect to the lead vocal. I'm going to play the vocal by itself first, then I'm going to add the track so you can hear it just alone. So see how it sits in the track by itself, how intimate and how up close it is, because he did want it to sound really up close, intimate, and personal. So here's the vocal.
Load up on
Here's the track.
Bring friends, far to lose, to pretend she's over.
Here's the doubler that I added without the track.
Load up on guns, bring
Without?
friends, fun to lose,
With?
to pretend she's overboard.
Okay. Now, some could argue, Ken, that takes away from the intimacy, and it might. It might. One of the reasons I added it is because I went ahead and took the liberty to sing the chorus down an octave and do 3 tracks of it. And I'm going to bring that in only on the chorus because it's obvious that, as we said before, that the goal was to get more and more and more intense. So why not make the chorus like really intense, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play this. I'll put the doubler in. You can check it out. I'll kind of go in and out as we go along, and you can really listen for it, how it sits in the track. And you go, oh, cool. Yeah, it makes it sound kind of more expensive. It sounds a little bit fatter. You know what I mean? So here we go. Here's with the track itself, but without the double.
Load up on guns, bring friends.
Here's a double.
Far to lose, to pretend she's overboard.
Without.
Self-assured, no, the dirty
With.
word.
And you're going to say, God, Ken, that's so subtle. I can hardly tell the difference. Actually, if you're really listening for it, you really can. Let me take out the track now, and I'll tell you when it's in and out. Here we go. Here's without.
Hello, 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 hello,
With.
hello, 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 hello,
Without.
hello,
With.
hello, hello,
Right?
hello, hello.
Now, when we get to the chorus, I want to point out, I'm going to go just the lead vocal by itself without any of my doubling. I want you to hear the way the chorus comes off, and then I want to show you what I did to it. Check it out. So that's that. Now check this out. Now watch when I put this in. I'm going to take the track out, and I'm going to put in all of my doubling effects so you can hear this like this. With nothing, ready? Here's what all the tracks in. Hear how much more beefy it is? Now let's go back to the track and listen to it in the track. So I'm going to start at first with just the vocal by itself with no extra voices in it, and then you're going to hear it with all the extra cheese that I added to it. By the way, I didn't even add any reverbs, and I wanted to point that out too. I decided not to to saturate it, to have it sound real room-like, because I still wanted that real intimate upfront sound. So there are 0 reverbs on any of this. All I did was add the doubling effect on the vocal itself, and then the octaves that I sang down below. So listen really closely with first without it, and then I'm gonna show you when I add it. I'm gonna leave the track in so we can hear it with the track. Check it out. Without it first, here we go. Whoops. Here's without it. All right, here we go. Okay, so I want to do this one more time where you can hear this now without the track. So here's no track with just the solo vocal.
With the lights out, it's dangerous. Here we are now, entertain us. After stupid and contagious. Here we are now, entertain us. I'm alive.
Pretty big difference, right? And you don't really hear all this in the track other than it just, again, it becomes more aggressive and bigger and bigger and bigger and fatter as we go. Okay? Hope you guys like that, and definitely check out my next video.